Hello, and welcome to Gatekeepers. And this week, we're discussing Rule 0. The Game Master is always right, or at least the Game Master sets the rules. If you have not done so, please consider hitting the subscribe button, as it helps the channel grow. And the links to the other channels that will be on tonight will be in the video description below. If you enjoyed tonight's content, please consider hitting the like button. If you don't like it, well, feel free to hit that dislike button. I accept all kinds of feedback. Also, leaving a comment on the channel or this video or other related Gatekeeper videos will tell us your interests and what kind of content we should be covering into the future. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, my name's Jade, and this is my Tabletop Tavern. It's a little messy behind me. Things are moving around, preparing for a new table and such. But with me tonight is Connell, the Cigar DM. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
Also joining me is Mar. Welcome, Mar.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I have to fix my camera in a moment. So I'm not the only one having technical difficulties tonight. The other person having technical difficulties is Shadow from Shadow and Sons. Welcome, sir.
Wow, it actually looks right now.
Yeah, I did a video earlier this morning on this device because that's how I do things. But my freaking super expensive freaking laptop has been nothing but trouble since the day I got it.
So you temporarily left so you could switch to the other device. Okay.
Yes.
You know, you talk about your laptop, and it takes me back to, I think it was Lethal Weapons 3 with when the guy, the skis, was it 3? Yeah. Sleazy guy was talking about fast food. They fuck you on the way in, they fuck you on the way out. But we're talking about your laptop, so it almost fit.
There we go. All right, so even my PC is having difficulties today because all my settings were gone. So it's kind of why it took so long to get here.
Oh, yes. It likes to do this thing where Windows updates things while you're not looking because why bother telling you when it's just routine updates, right?
I have not found a single setting that Windows has made that they can't break with an update.
And I do have an update that's ready, so maybe that's it.
Yeah, well.
That's actually worse. Is that when it's installed an update but hasn't rebooted your computer to finish the installation yet?
Right. So anyway, technical difficulties aside, tonight we're discussing the primary rule, the first rule, the rule before the rules, and this is the Game Master is the one who makes the rules. The Game Master is the one who sets the rules and chooses the game system which to run. Now, some people might call this because I said so. Some people might call it the Game Master is always right. If the Game Master is ever wrong, please see Rule 1. I can see the merits of doing this. As a matter of fact, I have also been the Game Master who sets Rule 0 of no, you cannot do that because I said so. I have done that. And that's kind of what we're talking about tonight. So let's get into the topic questions. So whether it's an on-the-spot ruling during a game, or not being able to reveal information to the players because sometimes there are just things the players just don't know. We game masters have to have an out or a foot or put our foots down, and lay down the law on our players, and just say those magical words. No, I'm not going to allow that. And when the players go, but it says right here, I don't care what it says in whatever splat book, magazine, or forum post. I am the Game Master. This is my table. This is a common thing that comes up at many tables. And I know I've been the player to ask Game Masters, hey, I found this really awesome thing in a printed from the studio or from the manufacturer in this one book that they printed. Can I use it? And the game master will read it and say, no, you may not use it. And I had to be okay with that. So.
Let me go grab my hat that with the horns on it, because I have a feeling it's going to be one of those conversations.
Do whatever you must. So, Shadow, I'm going to start with you on this one. What are some of the instances where you have had to lay down the law, so to say, for players? Give us an example of when you have done this and why you have done this.
Well, when I first someone had brought up because I said so. I'm like, I need to write the questions for this one. There are so many times where the players just don't understand what you've got going on in the background. There's so many times where you can't tell them everything, and I'm going to go with that for now. We can get later on with the rulings per se, but I want to focus on you don't know everything, and there are things going on. And sometimes, especially let's go with NPCs. NPCs are going to act a certain way, but they may be lying. People forget that. A lot of times they just assume that the NPC is just, I'm here to give you an info dump. Long or short as it may be, you can always trust the NPCs, and that's not the case. You've got to sometimes do the detective work. In Dungeons and Dragons, it's not as common. Games like Call of Cthulhu, you learn, or better yet, Top Secret, you learn to, get the information, then verify the information from at least two separate sources, just like in the real world. Somebody tells you something, you unless it's your preacher or something like that, you're probably not going to take it as face value. Even with really close friends, they tell you, this thing, especially if you watch the internet a lot and see all these crazy stories going on. Well, okay, that sounds terrifying. I'm going to go look up and see what else I can find and try to get, your information from two separate sources, preferably opposing sides. And somewhere in the middle, you'll actually get the truth of the situation. And I've had multiple NPCs that, for example, I had this one NPC in a very long-running campaign. She wasn't quite a PC character, or a DM character, which I learned a long time ago. You don't do that. But if I make up an NPC that's going to hang out with them for a while, I'll write up all the stuff, what they own and all these things. But from the very beginning, she had told the players something. Basically that the undead that were marching north from the south, invading all the lands and destroying everything in their path and then raising it up from the dead. Well, she worked for them. She was, trying to bring back her long lost lover back to life, and was told by the undead if, she did this thing, they would do that for her. Of course, they were lying, and, she fell hook, line, and sinker for it. And they brought this woman along with the party all the way till the end of the freaking campaign, where they found out the whole time she was doing these things, in the background to help, because they kept upping the ante as in the undead. It's like, oh, well, we still need you to do this, and we still need you to do that. And, of course, she was working for the bad guys, and they never suspected it. And had they just did a little bit of checking around, they would have understood that the person that she was trying to rescue was in fact dead, not imprisoned. And they just took it at face value, and you've got to understand, as players, you don't get to know everything.
Okay. So going to move on to Mar. What are some instances where you as the game master or as a player have had the law laid down on you, basically the game master saying, no, it's not going to work that way, and here's why? Have you ever had this experience, and can you give me an example?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people who is known in some circles for making really, really screwball character ideas. Not because I'm trying to be intentionally disruptive, it's just that it amuses me. And
Okay.
Sometimes people just, it's like, yes, that sounds cool. However, it doesn't fit. So don't do that.
Okay.
Like one 5e thing I did is that a character who was she had magic abilities that were related to fire, and my idea for the character was that she was constantly on fire and could accidentally light things on fire by touching them. And to be quite honest, I was expecting the GM to tell me no, and then he later regretted not telling me no, and I was only doing it because I thought it was cool. I didn't know whether he would have a problem with it or not, and he did have a problem with it and didn't tell me no. No.
Yes. Okay. I've got some examples related to that as well, and I will get back to my examples later. Connell, how about you? Have you ever had...
Hold on. That sounds like a whole lot of his problem, not so much your problem, because he could have said no from the get-go and let it ride.
I know. It's just one of those things. It's like, I was kind of expecting him to tell me no when I suggested it.
I made characters this guy just said no to right off the bat. So if he lets something I do slide, that's not my fault. That's all.
But sometimes, despite what we think, sometimes GMs, they're trying to make an enjoyable game, but if they realize they've been hoodwinked, sometimes reacting to that as such really looks bad, and it's really hard to go, hey, you know what, I screwed up and I need to redo everything that we've thought about this character, as opposed to just bring in the limitations that maybe you should have in the first place by making some new limitations, or throwing a curse at them, or something to that nature, so that it doesn't look like we're being arbitrary or Indian givers, or however you want to call it, where we're taking back all the cool stuff that we just handed out, because you never want to get caught doing that in an obvious manner, for the sake of you're breaking my game. But sometimes, as you'll see in a minute, you got to lay down the law.
Okay, what was the question you're going to ask me? I'm sorry,
Yeah, so Connell, have you ever, as a game master or as a player, experienced the scenario where the game master has basically said, no, you cannot do this, or no, you cannot have X, Y, Z, or whatever the case might be?
No.
Have you ever experienced this experience?
Right, I got two. I got one as a DM and one as a player. I've outlawed in Pathfinder summoners. Outlawed them. They're not playable races, playable classes. In my mind, there's a lot of ways to break a lot of different characters. I get that. I understand it from 3.5 days in Pathfinder, playing with you and amongst other people. I don't always see the mechanics on, well, that's going to be broken right up front. But as down the line, I'm like, oh, I get it now. But summoners to me are just, especially when you wear them as a mech.
Summoners, I couldn't understand what you were saying. Sorry, dude.
That's right. Summoners, when you wear your thing as a mech suit, so I have to go through its hit points before I can start getting your hit points. And this is at first level. No, Hoss. If this was like later on, like 10 or 15th level ability, I'm like, okay, whatever. I kind of get it. Because now, the wizard could do mage armor. I'm like, yeah, mage armor has a point. They have to wait a couple levels before they can get them. Do you have to wait a couple levels? Either way, it doesn't matter. It's just no. And as a player, it's a hell no. Hey, can I put a fireball on top of a blunt arrow? But the mechanics is this. Well, technically, the mechanics says this. Now we're just going by what the DM says is the ruling of it. Because depends on how you read the rules and how big of an argument you want to make. It is a doable mechanic to hoodwink, one would say. So if you got a DM who knows you, who knows your shenanigans, And we'll say no because they're right, even though the mechanics say otherwise. You know, you have to go with your DM to a certain degree. You have to go with what he says. I believe as a DM, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If I have, if I have a player who says, I want to make a staff, magical wizard staff with an attached shotgun on the bottom of it. Okay, you can have that, but guess what? The bad guy is going to have it too. And so when I DM, you know, I'll say this up front. When I DM, I don't just say no. Give me an argument. And if it works in the mechanics of the game, I will relent. I just won't, you know, it just won't. Just communication. Communication is key to good gaming, in my opinion. But
it is.
I got my no buttons. Summoners can all go burn in hell. With those who play Magic the Gathering Slither decks, those sick bastards can burn in hell too. Just no.
Just no. Okay. Yeah, so for me, I have laid down the law, so to say, with my rule 0, typically at session 0. It's typically where I get all the background data out of the way, like all of the limitations on character creation, class options, race options, whatever the player options are. I get all of the limitations out of the way at the very first meeting. And if I have said no to something, there is a pretty good reason for it. As an example, when I ran Wrath of the Righteous, I said no gunslingers, no hybrid classes, no classes that were printed after Wrath of the Righteous was written. I had a publication date for everything. And I fully read the entire adventure path well before we started the game. So I knew all the classes that were available. I knew all the powers, feats, spells, everything that was available in those modules. And I basically said, no, you don't get to play this class out of this book, out of the Unchained book, because the Unchained book was printed after the publication of Wrath of the Righteous Adventure Path, meaning things in there may not be on par with what is in the Wrath of the Righteous modules. So, that was my reasoning for it. I just didn't allow gunslingers because they were actually not in the area. They're from a completely, opposite end of the continent. So that's why I didn't allow the gunslingers, even though they were available as options for, publication wise for players to pick. I just didn't allow it because it didn't thematically make sense. Now, as a player, I've had this happen actually just recently. I'm actually in a game for like every other Saturday group, opposite of Bruce's weekends. And the game, I came up to the game master and like, hey, every fight we get into, my character, he's a paladin. He gets knocked down below half hit points every single combat. I'm sitting there in like single digits at 4th level, constantly. My character is going to die. I have no qualms about this. I know my character is going to die. It doesn't bother me. So I'm looking at backup options. I come up to the game master. Okay, what options? Because we went through this magical portal. We're in an entirely different world. What are my racial options? What are my class options? You tell me what you want, what you have in your world available, and I'll tell you some of my ideas. So we go back and forth, and I'm like, hey, I got this really cool idea for this fire subtyped race, that you have in your world as a monk. But I want to take this one feat that allows me to swap my strength for my wisdom in my attack rolls called intuitive attack. It's actually in printed material. And he's like, no, I do not want to allow any substitutive abilities or attack rolls or saves. And I'm like, okay, so does that include weapon finesse? The answer is no, it doesn't include weapon finesse. So I was basically told, no, that is not an option. I'm like, okay, we've got one more for you. Can I take this one meta magic feat, because this character is going to be a fire caster. Fire subtyped people, fire caster, just makes sense. I want to take the ability to say, I don't care about resistance for fire, and I don't care as much about immunity to fire. My fire is going to hurt even things that are typically immune to fire. And the game master's like, no, I don't want that in my game either, because I know it can be abused, and I know there are certain players who are going to abuse it. I'm like, that's fair. That's more than fair. So, 20 years, into the hobby, into, something I've been doing for a long time in the game engine that I know, even I get, no, rule zeroed, you're not doing it. I'm like, okay, that's more than fine. So those are some of our examples of when we have laid down rule zero, and when we've had it used against us. And if a game master says, hey, I don't want it in my game and here's why, and they offer you a decent explanation, go with it. If they don't offer you any explanation at all, go with it. It's their game, not yours.
Yeah, there's always going to be things if a GM tells you why you can't, that's kind of going to alert you to things that are coming down the road.
Possibly.
The GM may not want you to know that little bit of info.
I mean, for example, one game I heard of, not one I was actually playing in, mind you, was the party was going to be from a certain region of the world. And, certain races were, shall we say, not looked on fondly within that region. So the GM is like, you know what, we're not going to use those races for the player characters at the start of the game because, you would all be hunted down as monsters because of the fact that the people in this region just, that's what they do.
Well,
and let's face it, some races are monsters.
Humans are always monsters. Remember that.
To some of us, maybe.
Well, sometimes the no has nothing to do with the storyline. His with the wrath of the righteous. The only reason, there's multiple reasons why to say no to gunslingers in Pathfinder, especially when they hit touch, not AC. Which I've been more than welcome to say no. I have to hit AC, not touch, as a gunslinger. But rules as written, it goes touch over AC, which is. I agree with you, Jade. That's bullshit. I agree.
No, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that rule of guns hitting touch AC. That makes sense to me. I think that armor should offer some kind of protection against its, let's say, damage reduction.
Right.
But, now we're kind of getting off the beaten trail.
No, the reason why I'm bringing it up was the no wasn't that you thought, because gunslingers came out way before Wrath Righteous. It was a regional issue because they're in a small little part of the world and we are nowhere. The argument could be, well, people do travel, but that's getting into the weeds of the situation. It was, they're way down here, we're way up there. Just no way in logical theory one would be in the other. And it's just a no. It has nothing to do with the game. It was a regional thing.
Yep. So, and even I've even told this individual over here, I've told you no on several things that you wanted to do with, arrows. Glue. I'm going to glue a pearl of fireball from a string of fireballs or a necklace of fireballs onto a blunt arrow. I say no because the rules of the item basically say as soon as you take the bead off, it's primed. It's going to go off. It's like a grenade. As soon as you throw it, as soon as it leaves your hands,
daisy chain them. Just stick the arrows, each arrow on one, and you just daisy chain them.
I probably would have allowed that. Anyway. So,
it's in Pathfinder for me to pull it off.
So let's move on to the next question. What are some reasons why you may have to make a ruling on the spot? Kyle, I'm going to start with you on this one. And can you give me a reason why you would have to pull a rule zero on the spot with a player?
It breaks the game. It unholily breaks the game. There's sometimes, like in Bruce's campaign, when a character decides to drop a bag of holding into a portable hole. Depends on how the DM wants to rule that. Congratulations, you just made a black hole on your planet, and the rest of the world is going to get sucked up as this thing gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So a lot of DMs could just say no. A deity shows up. For whatever reason, it does not happen. But I want it to happen too damn bad. There's a door if you disagree. You don't want. We all make players. We all do actions that could not break, but could change the path that we're on right now for the later goal. But if you have something, or they're about ready to do something that completely not only blows up the path, but the forest, the road next to it, and there's just no way to get back to the main goal, the DMs just have to, in my opinion, just say no. And I hate that. But there's got to be, you got everybody at the table wants that game to keep going. And if somebody's about ready to do something that ends that theory, then you got to say no.
Okay. So you're saying that if player action would bring about the end of meeting up regularly, the game master needs to put their foot down and say, wait a minute, let's not do this.
There's a magical door. Every time you open the door, you go to a new place. Okay, I'm going to open up 5 times, one X many times. Well, there's a trash on the other side. I'm going to go up and smack it and run away. No.
Yeah. If a game master does that, and I have done that, then they kind of get what they deserve. They can't really just say no at that point, especially if they're the ones that put themselves in the situation. So, if you're going to use rule 0, use it responsibly. Don't just go ham with it. Use it responsibly and be fair. For the love of God, be fair with it. All right, so Mar, what are some reasons that you think a game master might have to rule 0 their players on the spot?
Every now and then, players will just do something creative that just... It's not that what they're doing is, metagaming or scenario breaking. It's just they decide they want to try something that has no mention of it in the book whatsoever, and is something that the TTRPG you're playing isn't really designed around. Like one example, it's like, players might decide they want to take the Minecraft approach to looting a dungeon. What I mean by the Minecraft approach is stealing the entire dungeon a piece at a time. Because in Minecraft, you find a structure in the wild, like, oh, this is interesting and useful building materials, and then you just dismantle the whole stinking thing and take it home with you.
I mean, we took a door that was like 100% type platinum once.
That was adamantine.
Adamantine? Yeah, we just kind of took it off and ran off with it.
I mean, that's a small example. But the thing I'm getting at with this, though, is that the TTRPG may or may not have rules related to this. And you, as the game master, if you players decide to do that, you might have to make up rules on how to handle it. Just, okay, one example of something where the players might just like go completely off into left field from what the game rule book is expecting players to do.
I can definitely see that being a thing. Training your players to your game mastering method. That does go a long way, and it does prevent headaches into the future. Sorry, I've been forgetting to click on chat here. Never say no. Just say, are you sure you want to do that?
I've heard that a few dozen times. Are you sure? Nah. I'm like, fuck.
So, what about you, Shadow? What are some reasons that you may have to make a Rule 0 ruling on the spot during a game?
I wanted to address a couple things. Just because we're the game master doesn't mean we have the books memorized. Line, verse, page, etc. Sometimes we have to make a rule on the spot because we're not going to, go in and look up the book and disrupt the game. Now, as for the no or are you sure, I pretend to do something a little bit. Yeah, we had a long talk about that just the other day, Scott. I prefer to say you won't know till you try, because them asking me a question like, "Can I do this?" How the hell will I know? Okay. Also, if it's truly a sandbox, then they can try anything. Whether they're going to succeed or not, that's different. Now, if you're not running a sandbox and you are running more or less a quasi railroad or a full-fledged roller coaster, then that in itself is going to lead to the fact that they can't do this, otherwise they're basically essentially getting off the ride, and you're not prepared for that, and you never want to let them know that, because then they will do that every chance they get to derail your railroad, because a lot of players really take issue with being on a railroad, knowing that they're just along for the ride. But I am really fond of no. I've trained a lot of animals and people, and no says it all. Just no. You can't do it. No. Especially with like my dog. Most of you guys have dogs out there. After the dog has heard it a couple of times, followed with the rolled up newspaper or whatever your preferred method is, they don't want to hear that ever again. And boom, it teaches them real quick to maybe think a little bit more before they decide to act. But for why I'm going to make a ruling on the spot, it's usually because there are things going on, like I said before, that they just don't understand. Maybe the door has a spell on it that prevents a very specific thing. I also have this thing in my game where, in some of my more high-powered games, where there are basically like wish wars. Okay, people acquire wishes and use them for really super advanced contingencies. Okay, like I can never be affected by kryptonite. Okay, so the player brings the kryptonite out and it's not working. Why? Well, you don't know. I'm not going to tell you. It's just not working. Or maybe magic doesn't work. How many times have people come into a room or an area and magic doesn't work? You don't know why it doesn't work. You can't use magic to detect why magic doesn't work here. So I'm not telling you the answer to things that you have no right knowing, and asking me a bunch of questions, which you kind of shouldn't anyways. But anyways, it's not going to work that way. You're going to have to try and figure it out for yourself.
So times that I have used Rule 0 for on-the-spot rulings are when players have misinterpreted a particular rule, or the rule itself, because I typically run rules as written, or the rule itself was very poorly misworded. This most often comes up actually in Iron Kingdoms, because they really needed some good editing. They needed to take a little more time with it for 3.5 release. But in Index Card RPG, I actually had because I was running the free RPG day with Index Card RPG. One of the powers that were listed was every time you make a total roll of, I think it was like 18 or higher, you get to attack again. So the player asks, like, how many times can I do that in a round? And I looked at it and I'm like, for the sake of free RPG day, I'm going to say once per round. You can make one free attack per turn. Generally speaking, though, that the rule is actually supposed to be if you roll a combined 18 or better, you get an extra attack, period. It doesn't say limitations to it. It doesn't have limitations to it. You know, free RP or index card RPG is very, very loophole friendly, so to say. There's a lot of built-in loopholes that, you know, or gotchas that players can use against game masters. But generally speaking, the game master's like, yeah, okay, whatever. My monsters don't actually have rules. Like, they have guidelines more so than rules. So yes, you can get, you know, 10 attacks in a round so long as you continue rolling that 18 plus. My boss monsters get 3 to 4 actions per round, you know, for their turn. You know, and if I'm going to pair them with mooks and support, you know, that the action economy is on my side, not your side. So, you know, go ahead and make as many of those attacks as you wish. Just know that, you know, I'm going to use my monsters to their full effect as well. So use your abilities. Absolutely go for it. But, you know, like I said, for free RPG day, I was just like, you know, for the sake of everyone at the table, I just need to limit it to 1 extra action per round. And it worked out well because the player did use it a few times, but it didn't come up more than, I think, 3 times for the full 2 hours that we were playing. And I've also had other instances where a player's like, hey, is this how this works? And they'll use it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you did that. I'm not going to allow that to happen again, because you're effectively breaking the entire concept of the game. Like, it's supposed to be a team game, and you're wanting to use this feat combination plus these skills and class abilities to basically play solo mode. If you want to play solo mode, don't come to my table. You know, go home and play through a scenario by yourself if that's what you want to do. If you don't want to have any teammates help you for any reason, and you want to get all the loot to yourself and you want to have all the enemies to yourself, don't play a social game. Just don't. Go home, play a solo game. There are plenty of games out there and rules for games out there that are meant for solo play. And you know, you could do that with Index Card RPG. You can do that with D&D. I think 5e has solo rules. There's several game options out there for you.
Go play Halo.
Yep, and Baldur's Gate 3 is just released recently, so you can go play solo mode if you wish.
Oh, another thing I will say no to really quick is players who want to play these characters.
I can't see what that is. Oh, is that a wheelchair?
That is a wheelchair. I can't. Yes.
And you know, I see that, L, that you know, you say, you know, Connor for some reason really likes me. I haven't really had a lot of one-on-ones with the guy. But yes, if, you know, I roll dice at my table, I have random elements in my games that you may or may not exceed based on luck or die roll. My table is probably not the best for Shauner. If I had a virtual table going right now, I'd let him in. And if he decided it wasn't for him, that's for him to decide, not for me to decide. So, you know, just putting that out there.
I just thought it was something amusing about the wheelchair thing, which would fit into the whole like Rule Zero thing, because one aspect of Rule Zero that I personally have used is the idea of I'm the GM, I make the rules, which means that I can homebrew monsters during the game session if I really want to.
Yep,
absolutely.
As long as you keep it fair.
And what I just thought of is the idea of having a magical trap that creates a mimic that mimics a piece of gear one of the party members is playing and replaces the piece of gear.
That's just not nice. That's just not nice.
But the reason why I thought of that was he held up a wheelchair figure, And it's like, okay, imagine if it was the wheelchair that got replaced.
I mean,
that would assume that the character leaves the chair for some period of time. And trust me, people in wheelchairs don't actually leave their wheelchairs. Except for the restroom and bedtime.
Well, the idea I had was that it was magic and that it was more or less a form of teleportation.
That's a little too much.
Well, either way.
I know. It's one of those things that would be like an uber high magic world thing.
But no, so like homebrewing monsters, abilities, powers, spells, like that's all within Rule 0 for a game master. You know, Rule 0 doesn't have to be this unfun thing where the game master is super controlling about what the player's actions are and what players can and cannot do. Rule 0 is there for the game master to, well, make rules and rulings for their players, mostly rulings for their game. And that includes the ability of giving players amazing rewards that are not in any of the books. Like, game masters have that purview to go, oh yeah, by the way, here's this piece of equipment. You're not going to find any of its abilities in a book, and here's how it works. It's up to you to decide how you want to use it. Go for it. So that's well within the purview of Rule 0. So moving on to the third question, if nobody's got anything else. 1.2.6. Okay. So sometimes players don't know everything, and sometimes there are things that, things that happen that the players are completely unaware of. Can you give us an example of one of these and why you would rule that they cannot necessarily figure out the solution to the said happening or event? Shadow, I'm going to start with you on this one because these are mostly your thoughts, and I'd like to know where you're going with this one.
Right off the bat, there are these things called gods, angels, demons, devils, etc. There are these super powerful beings in your campaign that are doing things that you have no clue about. You're a first level character, you're a 10th level character. Hell, you could be a 20th level maxed out uber character. You still have no idea what those kinds of things are doing behind the scenes, and any GM worth of salt that includes those entities in their game, they're going to be doing things. They don't just, wait for your, call on the phone to grant them spells and abilities and favors. They're doing stuff. And especially, the demons, devils, and evil gods out there, they're the ones that are the most busy, unless they're like, the sloth type demons and whatnot, and then they're not doing a damn thing. But they're doing all kinds of nasty stuff in the background. And if you actually want to get to those kinds of levels, hell, even if you want it to be a 0 to hero and never make it past 7th level as the GM, those gods are still doing things. Those demons, those devils, those angels, especially like if you're the bad guys, you're playing evil characters, unless you want to face nothing but, DM created paladins and lawful good clerics and things like that to hunt you down, and inquisitors and stuff like that, the GM's going to bring in all kinds of other things. There aren't like a ton of really good monsters out there, otherwise it wouldn't really be called monsters. But if you're playing the bad guys, eventually the really good guys are going to take notice and start doing things. If you're playing the good guys and you're doing good stuff, eventually the really big bad guys are going to start to take notice and really not like you much and do things. And sometimes, you don't know. Nobody ever asks where these cursed magic items come from and things like that. Well, it's probably the really big bad guys doing stuff and dropping them in your path and just watching and, making a big old bowl of popcorn and just seeing what happens.
Okay, so I do have a follow-up question to that. So if these things are happening to players where, the gods or angels or whatever shadowy forces are moving in the background, do they ever have the opportunity to figure out what's going on in the background, or that there is even a background for things to move within? Do they ever get that option? Or
they have the option They should have the option, but believe it or not, a lot of times they don't ever think like that. They think the world revolves around them, and they're just more upset that it didn't go their way. If they think about it and they figure it out, then by all means you should let them know. Sometimes even leaving them a little clue. Oh, you find a little bit of sulfur left behind, or there's this funny footprint that you can't quite make out. It's kind of looks like a goat, or something like that. Or maybe some of their divination spells or things like that could be brought into play. But a lot of times they just don't figure it out. But if they do, absolutely let them know, especially if you plan on running a game that's going to get high level. Well, eventually the standard bill of fare of monsters in the monster manual aren't really going to be enough. You're going to want to break out those big guys. They're in there for a reason in all the monster books. Use them. Get ready to use them. And what better way to get ready to use them than to start using them early on as behind-the-scenes movers and shakers, and then when they finally figure out, oh, it was you all along, it makes it that much more poignant.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to move to Mar next. So Mar, are there any times where your players are trying to use player knowledge? Because I'm assuming that's where this is going, is player knowledge instead of character knowledge. And do you ever shut that down? And if you do, how do you do so?
Oh, boy. As I've mentioned in the past, I have done a lot of stuff with the Star Trek setting in the past, and Trekkies can be next level when it comes to having voluminous player knowledge of the setting.
Good point.
And, it's just like trying to separate character knowledge from player knowledge can be utterly essential because of the fact that often things that are player knowledge are things that in universe are tightly guarded secrets. Things that only a handful of people in universe know because they don't want the universe as a whole to know this because it's considered to be extremely dangerous.
Yeah, like whatever happened to that Romulan cloaking device Kirk absconded with.
Yeah. I mean, that's
Hey.
relatively low on the totem pole that I'm thinking of, but sure, that's an example.
What about the space herpes he started?
That is something that I was kind of sort of hinting at, is because there's like 20 different kinds of that or something in Star Trek, and
Space herpes? They all start from Kurt.
Wow.
Several of them are things that would be an apocalyptic plague if someone unleashed them on an inhabited world.
Yeah.
And you don't want people to have access to that sort of thing.
No.
Thank you, Cowboy. Thank you, Robot Chicken, for bringing us space herpes.
Right. So, Connell, how about you? Do you ever have the moments where players are trying to acquire information with player knowledge rather than character knowledge?
I'm kind of a dick in this way. There's a roll that you have to make. I will sometimes lower the DC, but there's don't bring that how this works in real life, because this is not real life. I don't care that you are a blah, blah, blah in real life. Your character doesn't know his head from the hole in ground when it comes to this subject, because he doesn't have a doctorate, a master's, or whatever in it. He is JoJo, the pet monkey at this one. He doesn't know Jack nor shit, and Jack just left town. And so it's a hard dice roll. I mean, Shadow brought up the divinity, and the way I treat that aspect, is the gods don't do shit. They let their people below them do it. The angels and whatever do all the angels are the ones who give the clerics and paladins their spells. Gods are just sitting on their hands doing jack shit, because that is because I've ran into stuff like that. What the child brought up with the divinity, and my response normally is, yeah, your guy doesn't really care about you, but he loves that you're doing good work for him in his name. And so I lock everything up between dice rolls. For the most part of it, I will look at the dice roll, and I mean not the dice roll, but the DC. And if it's incredibly fucking stupid, I mean just stupid, I will lower it down by maybe 5 points. Where if it should be like a 30, I'll bump it down to maybe a 25. Depends on what level they are. Because you play Pathfinder as long as I have. There's some DCs out there for the modules that are just fucking dumb. They're uncontainably dumb.
There are so I have a problem with skill-based games as a whole anyway.
Yeah.
And 3.5 Pathfinder is probably one of the worst perpetrators of if you can, beat the DC, you can do anything. Especially when it comes to certain types of skills. I'm just like, no, that doesn't make sense.
I mean, if you're playing,
you make a 100 on a stealth check, and not even the gods can find you. That gets into the realm of why are we going that far?
But I mainly do that for knowledge checks. For everything else, it is what it is. There are classes out there like Bard that basically are walking librarians if you make them correctly. And so having a Bard who already has a knowledge, something +3 because of his whatever, he's going to already have a fairly high percentage chance of making that roll anyways. But every once in a while, when your party is only 15th, but the DC is like 40, I'm like, there's no possible way. I mean, and you can't rolling a nat 20 does no longer count for skill checks. It's no longer an auto access.
I mean, at that point, you just tell the players it is not a possible thing to do.
Right. I also
you cannot. You just cannot do it.
Again, this is one of those things where it's the classic GM fiat: is that the GM does not have to do skill check rolls if the story says otherwise.
Right. Oh, I get. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just want the story going. And what were you going to say there, Shadow?
What is this nonsense that even the gods cannot find you? Is the character a god? Is the character a god?
At that point, 0 level.
Is it okay? So, is it as old as the other old gods out there? It makes literally that's
the point of that is, and this is primarily D&D 3.5, and we are going off on a bit of a tangent here. It's somewhat related, but so in 3.5 and 3.0, the gods have stats. They are level 40 beings that have divine rank. They are assumed to always roll natural 20s. This is straight out of the Deities and Demigods book. The highest skill check that any one of them has for perception is, I believe, the monk one. Is that Irori? No, that's the Pathfinder. I can't remember this name off the top of my head from Greyhawk. Either way, so the gods listed in the book, and it wasn't the avatars. It was the gods listed in the Deities and Demigods 3.0 book. We're level 40, and the highest stat when rolled with natural 20 for perception, I think, came out to 80. So if you were rolling 100, you could hide from the gods. It was just by rules as written by the numbers, they couldn't find you. That's what that was.
Those are some
and that's when you as the game master basically say, okay, I'm not using those stat blocks for the gods. That's when you just say rule 0, not using those stat blocks.
Makes it feel like the people writing that system were thinking of how Thor is one of the Avengers in Marvel Comics, that level of gods.
Yeah, the gods have been around for countless millennia, getting experience points every day in their god classes.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of assumption for make-believe gods on a piece of paper.
Yep. So when it comes to
Wouldn't you
when
do
it
the
comes
same
to
thing
me,
for one of them?
No.
But
when
you're
it comes
lazy.
to how I handle metagame and what players should know and shouldn't know, generally speaking, I am kind of tracking their progress through whatever the story might happen to be, whatever clues that I know that I have made for them, and what red herrings that I have made available. So I kind of let them guide where it's going, and if one of them figures it out, awesome, they figured it out. Good for them. I'm not gonna, say, oh well, that was you, the player, figuring out, not your character. No, I don't care about that. Oh sure, yeah, you figured it out. But if players are going to the nines and like finding, like if I'm running a module and the players go find the module online and be like, oh yeah, this is what's coming up next, I can't wait to have that thing. Well, they don't find it there. Like the thing they're looking for isn't there. Why? Because I said so. Because I moved it or I changed it in some capacity that it's not what you're expecting. Because if I know my player, and especially, and it's easy to tell when my players have read ahead on modules because
That's
they're
called
doing
cheating.
things. Well, yeah, well, I mean, you could call it cheating, but
Every time.
if my players can, if the material's out there and is available to read, and my players read it, and I'll know if they read it, because they'll start doing actions or they'll be ready for certain things that are coming up, and I've, prepped the material for the session, just hours before. So I know it's fresh in my mind what's coming up. And if I see them starting to go, oh, hey, yeah, let's get ready for this. And, let's start putting on these buff spells. I know that they've read the module at that point. Okay, I'm going to change things. What they think is in that room is no longer in that room. I have moved things from that room. My monsters aren't idiots. My boss monsters aren't idiots. Especially when they in 3.5 or Pathfinder, when they've got an intelligence above 30, they're not just leaving stuff around for players to come find and get. No, they're actively using it. They're moving it around or actively corrupting it if it's a divine item. So, if my players are thinking ahead and actually able to think beyond me, which is not impossible. Like I've had players outthink me, not just at the table, but also away from the table. And they were able to read where I was going with something. I take that with a grain of salt and I'm like, okay, that's fine. How do I change it? And then I start thinking about, what should my players know and what should they not know? And if I come across knowledge, if I'm thinking that they shouldn't know this knowledge and they do, well, what can I do to either change it? And if it's something that matters, like what can I do to change that knowledge? Or put the twist in so that they're like, oh, that wasn't what we were expecting. Yeah, you're right. I know that wasn't what you're expecting, but this is what is here. So you are the game master. You have the ability to change the story. You have the ability to flip the script. Do it. I mean, don't do it maliciously. Do it with purpose. Your players are expecting, at the end of this long slog through spider infested caves to fight the spider queen. What if they don't find a spider queen? What if they find, I don't know, an umbral dragon or a dragon of the shadow plane? Or worse yet, what if they find an illithid, a brain eater, at the end of the caves? Then they're like, this is not what we were expecting. We were expecting spiders and webs or what?
Oh, sorry, someone. Or just some like weird monstrosity that is kind of sort of spider adjacent, but isn't a spider.
My favorite.
Sure. I mean, they could even be a bebolith.
Whoa.
Yeah, which is a great example. Okay, go ahead, Colin.
So I've ran into this because I run 5e, and a lot of the modules I'll go through, people have, played at least 10 times over. So you're getting down the hallway, and we all, as you said, we're going to buff all these spells. They open the door, and guess what? You all said different kind of monster, right? What if there is no monster? Thank you for burning spells you didn't need to. Have a nice day.
With the aboleth, it makes illusions. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How many times are we going to use illusions, or are we just going to throw them out because it pisses players off when they feel or find out they've been tricked by an illusion and they've been reacting and doing all these things against something that's not even really there, or a hallucination? We as GMs get the right to do those kinds of things, and they're not going to understand until it hits them full in the face. Oh crap, it was an illusion. You guys didn't think to disbelieve illusion. How many times as players have we said that? How many times outside the game have we used that cliche? I disbelieve your illusion. You know? Perfect example of you don't know because you're only getting certain information.
Was it yeah. No. Okay. For a perfect example, this past week, we walked into the room that had lots of mirrors. Me as a player had post-match switch order. Nope, walking out of this room with a bunch of mirrors. I know how this ends because I've been tortured by somebody with mirrors. Only for it to, if you walk in the room and walk out of it with your eyes open, all your physical belongings, clothes disappear off your body. They reappear back in the room. If you walk out of the room with your eyes closed, because there's a trigger, everything I can see is mine. That was a trigger. So if you walk out of the room with your eyes open, all your shit remains in the room without you. If you walk out of the room with your eyes closed, then everything, that's the trigger of the room. So the DM's like, well, you guys walk into this room full of mirrors. No, we don't. Nope. No, we do not. He's like, why do you think it's going to happen? I don't know, because I don't know this module, but mirrors are bad. All mirrors need to be destroyed.
Not all mirrors.
Yeah, apparently you don't believe the old adage of break a mirror and get 7 years of bad luck.
No, I believe the adage you walk in the mirrors, just because you can look in doesn't mean something isn't looking out. And for another example, this wonderful DM right here had mirrors of opposition. On that list? Yeah, no, almost a party kill.
Well,
that's what it's meant for.
Yeah, that is what it's meant for.
Yeah.
Mirrors are evil.
I just find it funny that you're okay with one superstition about mirrors, but not the other.
I mean, you also, so I mean, if you think about it, like there are, dating back, and this, this is real world, dating back in, some of the castles of, the bygone era, they had hallways of mirror. They were just lined with mirrors. And as a matter of fact, the Palace of Versailles has a room that is just called the Room of Mirrors, or the Hall of Mirrors. And what it is it is a room that is, I believe it's facing southeast. And all it's doing is catching the light of the sun from the windows and reflecting it throughout the room, making the room brighter. Like that was the intended purpose of many of the mirror rooms in castles and palaces, was to be able to reflect light, natural light. So, me, when I would design, castles or dungeons or whatever the case might be, especially palaces that are used by the villains, yeah, they're going to have hallways of mirrors lining them, because it's a natural feature of architecture for the buildings. Is one of them a mirror of opposition? Maybe. Is one of them a mirror of seeing, for scrying? Maybe. Is one of them a mirror of teleportation that can take you far, far away? Absolutely possible. Why wouldn't it be? Do my players know what the mirrors do? They shouldn't. If they think the room is full of, mirrors of opposition, well, they can try to cross it and see what happens. If they don't think there's a mirror of opposition there may or may not be. Who knows?
I've also seen some fantasy where they would have like a certain specific kind of magic mirror that are these large floor length models that you can step through like magic portals. It's just that you have to know what that mirror is for, or the magic doesn't work.
The mirror of mental prowess from the Dungeon Master's Guide had a whole bunch of different abilities packed to it. it's a phenomenal magic item. You get to ask a yes/no question. You get to scry, and you get to teleport through it. Who doesn't want that?
I am just saying my inner barbarian who doesn't like magic is going to rear his head. I don't care if I'm playing an elf wizard. My barbarian side of my character is going to pop out, and all mirrors are evil.
I mean, yeah.
Well, that's what you get.
There could be cultural significance there, but anyway, I think we're a little too far off the track now.
That guy right there.
Yeah. So I used 6 mirrors of opposition in one room. So what? Get over it.
That's a lot of XP when you beat them.
Actually, it's not.
No,
not in 3.5 at least. Yeah, 3.5 at 0 XP.
That's a shame.
So understanding all of the circumstances that we have listed out thus far, what are some ways game masters can explain without giving away everything that the players can, we can help the players understand where we're going, what we're doing, but without giving away the secrets to it. One thing a player, and this goes for pretty much all players, is the control freak GM. I've been there as a player. I've been there as a game master too, where I thought it was my game. This is when I was much, much younger. It's my game. Why you're just here to play? That was the completely wrong mentality. So sorry, my brain is still lagging behind. It's in low sleep. Trying to formulate this question better. Are there ways game masters can provide assistance to their players that isn't necessarily giving away the secrets that the game master is keeping close to his chest? For this, I'm going to start with Mar.
Sometimes when a story has, shall we say, a logical construction, it's relatively easy to connect the dots. When, even if things haven't been fully revealed, it's like, oh, this guy was shot with an arrow. So obviously, whatever killed him was wielding a bow. That sort of logic. Obviously, that's a very, very simplistic example, but anyway, story construction, it's like the big bad guy is someone who's probably, extremely powerful. So, the wizard that lives in the giant black castle, hey, maybe that's the secret bad guy that you're trying to find out. Maybe. But one of the things I mentioned with the Star Trek thing, though, is that a lot of the time, things that a person who hasn't memorized hundreds of episodes wouldn't know will be boringly obvious to someone who has. And it's one of those things where making up new things, you have to be very, very careful with how you make up new things in order to, one, not mess up your own setting by doing a complete rug pull that has no logical basis in universe, but also making it so that it's not boringly obvious.
Okay. So, Shadow, how about you? How do you give players information without giving away all of the secrets? Like, how do you go about doing that? Can you give me an example?
Yeah. And this is actually for me, the crux of the whole conversation. I'll simply say, trust me, you're going to love where this is going. Okay?
Okay.
If the players do not trust you and are more worried about winning and things like that, then they kind of have missed the point of the game. It's the journey, not the destination. unless you have a final destination in mind for your character, which, you know, should hopefully be retire and, you know, live happily ever after, or, you know, kill their enemy at any cost or something like that, fine. But we have to through deed and word let our players know that while we're on the outside apparently against them, we're always rooting for them, and we want them to have the best experience at the table possible. And to do that, we can't just, you know, throw rose petals at their feet and you know, give them a guided tour of the perfect world where everything they do is, you know, perfect and they never fail. They need to fail from time to time. They need to screw up and make mistakes, but knowing that, you know, there is a chance that the DM is actually right. He knows what he's doing, or she, and they have something great planned for the culmination of the game session or the campaign or what have you. And like I said, they're secretly rooting for you. But as the GM, they've got to throw obstacles in your way. And sometimes the obstacles are going to seem insurmountable. But, you know, you guys brought this up earlier, you know, when players outthink you, that is the height of having a great table. If you, as the GM, are constantly being bested by your players, you know you've raised and reared up a bunch of players that someday hopefully will be at the other side of the GM screen. Someday it'll be their turn to be behind that GM screen, and they'll be running a game for you, because as GMs, we all get a little burnout of being the GM and would love to be at the table with the rest of the guys trying to outthink the GM. And when you start getting the players that can outthink you, you're doing everything right.
Okay. So, Connell, what information do you provide your players, especially if they're like struggling to make connections happen? Like, what information do you give them to get them going in the right direction without telling them all of the secrets?
9 rumors, 1 truth.
Okay. Can you give me an example?
NPCs are a magnificent tool where you can basically lay out the entire campaign to your players without your players knowing it. Because Shadow's right. To a certain degree, the NPCs should not be info dumps. But if you're playing, like, say, Rise, not Rise, I don't want to say Rise of Ruin Lord. Let's say you're playing Ravenloft. The Gypsies. I don't care what 5th edition said. They're fucking Gypsies. I'm part Romanian, so they can go take a jump off a bridge with Dan. They're Gypsies. But everything you need to know about the campaign, you could probably find out at the Gypsy camp. You got the fortune teller that lays out the entire mission for you through the tarot cards. You got rumors going on that he's over here. No, the castle's over there. The sun sword is here. No, it's over there. Everything you need to know it could be laid out by the NPCs. The players just have to be not intelligent enough, but paying attention enough to put the dots together. We're not hiding anything from the players. We're potentially hiding anything. Yes, we do keep certain things close to the chest, but as a whole, we're trying to make sure the players have a good time. So if you set it up right with Ravenloft, like I said, the entire game, everything they need to know about the game is laid out to them. They just have to now piece it together. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to connect the dots.
And thanks for the shout out on Ravenloft there. Connell, I'm going to be reviewing like 20 different Ravenloft books in the next 40 days.
Right. I don't think I'm wrong. I might be wrong, but that's how I do it. Everything the person needs to know about the campaign is normally laid out with the first few levels through NPCs. 9 rumors, 1 truth game.
Okay. So as far as giving my players the information they need to make right assumptions, because sometimes my players will make bad assumptions as far as like what the villain is doing in the shadows, and I will have to put an NPC or put some kind of clue in their way that corrects some of those assumptions. Or sometimes the lack of evidence, might correct some of those assumptions. The players are looking for the evidence to fit this one specific niche thing, and it's just not there because it's not what happened. The players are like, oh well, we found a white powdery substance, at the crime scene. Maybe the baker did it. Maybe it's flour.
Mm-hmm.
Was it flour? Did you test it? Do you know what the white powdery substance was? Was it possibly saltpeter? Was it possibly, I don't know, some kind of phosphorus material? Like, did you actually test the material?
And when they go to the baker,
yeah, I mean, when they get to a certain conclusion, and they're like, oh yeah, let's go to the baker. It must be flour. They get to the baker, and the baker's got 10 alibis, because he's got the people who works for him there. He's like, oh no, yeah, the boss never left the shop, or we don't know why you're here. Why are you here? It's like, well, we found this substance at the scene. Well, that's not flour. Well, what do you mean that's not flour? I don't know what it is, but it's not flour. I don't know what to tell you. So, correcting player assumptions or false assumptions is sometimes necessary for a game master. And I've even had to do it a couple times where players were, let me see if I can remember the exact scenario. The players were hunting after an outlaw group, and the outlaw group was actually robbing trains along a certain area. So they're like, oh, well, the robbers must be, hiding somewhere in this area. Well, I mean, the stretch was like 50 miles of really rough terrain. And the players are like, well, we're never going to narrow this down. And they're like, okay, well, let's go up to, Bethel Garrison and, try to see if they have any additional information. Well, none of the crimes happened anywhere near the garrison at all. Like they were at least 100 miles away from all of the incidents. So when they finally got there, they heard through wire that, well, the more trains were robbed while they were on their way to the garrison. And the garrison's like, well, we don't know why you're here. Like, we don't have anything to do with this. We're not the people investigating this. Why did you come up here? The players were a little dejected about it and be like, well, where do we go from here? And the garrison commander's like, well, you probably need to go back to the capital and start your search over. What information do you have, and what information have you found? And I did that, as an NPC, to the players, like, what information do you have? What information and where does all of this information kind of point to? So they finally got the map that I handed them, got it laid out, and looked at all of the little tally marks of where the trains were robbed at. And, that was basically me as the game master saying, hey, it's somewhere here, not over there. So that was me correcting their false assumptions that they thought it was coming from the garrison. Because I think it was just one player is like, well, if I was going to, rob a train, I would do it, at least 100 and some odd miles from my base camp, so no one would ever find me. Well, that seems oddly inconvenient, but sure, especially with the limited time of the window that things were happening in. Like, the trains would get robbed like 3 days out of every 2 weeks, so they had to be acting close. So anyway, so that's kind of my examples of correcting your players' misconceptions or offering them the help they need to see the clues with a little more clarity in purpose, without actually telling them, hey, go there, do that. So what are some of the other ways we, and this actually So before I get into that question, many of the Rule Zero things, and this was a thing at the top of the night, was Rule Zero, if overused, especially on rulings, can break player trust in their game master. And that is something we want to avoid. We don't want to overuse Rule Zero. It's something that should be respected and metered by both players and game masters. Never overuse Rule Zero. The game master is always right. Don't overuse it. If your players, if you don't have something fully designed and don't have something fully in mind, okay, the players come up with something. Write the idea down. Let them feed you information to help you out. Don't overuse Rule Zero, because you are going to break the trust of your players. And once you've broken the trust of your players, your table dissolves rather quickly. It just does. Your mileage may vary there. If your players are always on board for the railroad and they don't have minds of their own, and they just accept whatever you tell them, well, keep going. Then keep meeting every week, because someone might be having fun.
Well, another thing is that if you're doing arbitrary fiat rulings, you'd better remember them all.
Yep,
because if you don't, the game you're trying to play will implode, because it'll just become nonsensical when you don't even remember what ruling you made last week.
That's a good point.
So,
should be one of the questions.
Yes, Scott. Yes, Rule Zero has to be fair. Even if Rule Zero is the game master sets the rules, or the game master is always right, you got to keep it fair. So, with all of that in mind, what are some of the ways that we can get our players to trust us when we're making a ruling, or not allowing them to have the information that they, the player, think it should be? How do we build up that trust? And how do we maintain that trust, I think, is the more important and poignant aspect of this. So, Shadow, I'm going to start with you again on this one. What are some of the ways that we can get our players to trust us, especially when we're making rulings or obfuscating specific information from them?
Well, besides what I said earlier, telling them, hey, trust me, remind them that they don't know everything. Maybe they need to double back, go back over their clues, take a minute to think the situation through, and come at it from a different angle. Sometimes, our plots and machinations behind the scenes may be a little bit too much for the group. Maybe, we've written it, where there's only a couple of ways, or God forbid, only one way to solve the problem. That's where player ingenuity needs to come in and start to shine. They're for Christ's sake, they outnumber you, in a good game, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys to 1. Give them a minute to think. Maybe even say, okay, I'm gonna stop the game here tonight. You guys go and talk amongst yourselves, and come back at me with some other proposals, some other ideas, other avenues of approach to the problem, and remind them, give them, excuse me, pup, give them some words of encouragement, maybe a hint, like you're getting warm, or you're way off base, or something like that, out of character. Maybe I don't recommend that very often, but if it's really looking grim for them, give them that encouragement, and remind them, you got this, you're almost there. Don't give them the smirk, and don't be proud of yourself because you've bested your players. That's a great way to, find out there's no game next week, or the week after, or the week after, or ever. Encourage your players, and remind them, you're rooting for them. Maybe not tell them it quite that way, but like I said before, trust me, guys, you're gonna love where this is going.
So to you, Connell, what are some of the ways you build trust? Because I know you're mostly a shop game master or a paid game master at a shop. What are some of the ways you build trust with your players, especially at a shop setting?
Well, first of all, I lay down some of the ground rules of what I expect at the table, just manners, common courtesy, stuff like that, because sometimes I have kids at my table, sometimes I have grown-ups at my table. So a constant, basically ground rules what I expect at the table goes a long way. And I'm not making fun of Shadow with this next statement, but I don't lead off with trust me because I'm a '90s/'80s kid. If any adult says trust me, I'm going to be walking the opposite direction. Danger, stranger. No, I do not want.
No, I wouldn't lead with that. That's
yeah, right. I'm just saying the whole trust me doesn't work, in my opinion. But if there's somebody wants to do something cool, and with Pathfinder, there's so many minute little rules and gears on the game work. I say, you know what, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna allow it this time, but after game, I'm gonna look into it, and I will have the final decision at the before next game. Or if I say no, I'm gonna say no this time, but give me a chance to look into it. And I will have the final decision next game. And yes, keep notes. As I said earlier, communication is what keeps these games going in a healthy direction. Also, having some patience for your players, and the patience having some for your players to have patience for the DM, because not one of us is perfect, and we don't know all the rules that that's ever been laid down in any of these systems. Granted, we might have a few lawyers around us at these tables, but it's not their place. It's your table, your game. You have final say. At the end of the night, you have final say. So if something goes on and I'm not 100% sure on, I basically tell them, hey, I'm going to say no because it doesn't sound right to me, or I'm going to say yes, but I'll have final the final ruling by next week. This is going to be a yes or a no. That's how I keep the trust going, is because I'm open and I'm open about what I'm thinking with them, and whatever I decide, I stick with. Because the moment you lean the opposite direction after you make that ruling, you're going to lose face, and you do not want that. You don't want that as a home DM, and you don't want that as a paid DM.
So, I'm not sure what happened to Mar. I wish him well. I don't know where he may be having internet troubles. Nope, he's back. So before I ask this question of you, Mar, I'm gonna get to L's question here. Why do people not trust the game master? Now, we kind of covered this topic a couple months ago when we discussed adversarial players and adversarial game masters. The primary reason why game masters may not be trusted by their players is they could be control freaks. They could be going, well, this is how my story works out. They could be adversarial and being very much I'm going to destroy everything you do and take the thunder out of the players. That is one way to break trust with your players real quick. Or when players pick certain like core rulebook options that are in the game. I'm talking whatever, it doesn't matter what game system it is, core rulebook options, and the game master goes, well, no, it doesn't work like that in my game. And doesn't tell them beforehand. It just he tells them after the fact when it comes up in a scenario. Like, oh no, I don't allow enchantment in my games. Oh, I don't allow necromancy in my games. I don't allow evocation in my games. Well, then what do you allow? Because the moment a game master starts basically saying no, I'm not allowing that, because the player has the power to shut down something the game master doesn't fully understand themselves. That's where the trust breaks almost immediately. And if you're going to be a game master, you have to know enough of the game's rules and mechanics to run it, but you shouldn't, if you don't understand a certain aspect of the game, take time to learn it and understand it. Because if you've got players who are like, oh yeah, I'm using this core rulebook thing, and this is how I'm going to use it. The game master should be able to read, because it's in the core rulebook, should be able to read it and make the determination of what it's supposed to do. Now, if the player is trying to use it for, not its intended purposes, then yeah, sure, the game master can go, yeah, no, that's not how that works. But, the moment you start saying, no, it doesn't work like that because I don't want it to work like that, even if the rules say that's the way it works, and the game master goes, no, I don't want it to work like that, you've broken trust. If you're going to do that, write your own game engine, disallow whatever stuff from the beginning, not during play.
Well, I mean, that's one of those classic bad GM things, it's like, oh, we're going to, oh yeah, you're not allowed to do that. Oh, well, because I said so. Just arbitrary things that don't actually have an in-universe reason are not well liked in general. And
I've never enjoyed the comment because I say so. I try very much as a parent not to say it to my kid. I'll explain why no is no. When I'm gaming for a bunch of kids, I'll explain why no is no. Saying because I say so to me is a lazy answer.
Well, that's actually something that my grandparents felt about parenting is that if children understand why something is a bad idea, they probably aren't going to, just go around behind your back and do it anyways. And with players,
so I say it all the time. It's my house, my rules. You don't like them, grow up, get a job, and do it yourself. Sorry, but
so sometimes it's the best way to do it. It's just if there is a reason for it, explaining the reason is not a bad idea. Anyway,
right, but when the child is 7, that's not necessary.
Yeah. They might not understand.
The explanation.
But anyway, so with
players are like
children. With players in a TTRPG, though, it's like sometimes actually explaining the reason might be a giveaway for the story. Like, I remember this one story from years back where necromancers were persecuted heavily, and the actual reason for that was because the other kinds of wizards feared them and did a PR campaign to make the public think that all necromancers were evil monsters.
Well, because they are.
Well, in this particular thing, what defined a necromancer was that they drew their power from the latent energy of the dead, and instead of drawing their power from some other aspect of nature. And that's the thing with that, though, is that people who can do that have a giant pool of mana compared to people who are siphoning energy out of forests or something like that.
Yeah, don't kill the tree. Just use the power of the dead. You're not killing anything else. I mean, it's more green friendly that way.
So Mark, I don't know where you went, but you disappeared for a moment there. So question number 5 to you. What are some of the ways that we can get our players to trust us as game masters? Like, what are the things that we can do to help build trust in our ability to facilitate the game in a fair manner?
Well, I mean, one thing I kind of touched on with that is, telling them why the world works a certain way, even if you do so in vague terms that don't, shall we say, give away the plot. Because of the fact that if they understand that, say necromancers are banned because of, say, the bad guy is a necromancer, and everyone in the region thinks that all necromancers should be executed because of something that this bad guy did, you know, you're not necessarily going to like info dump them that during character creation, but you would tell them that there's a plot reason why they can't play as a necromancer.
Aside from it being Aki.
So I think one of the things I do to help build trust is right out of the gate, you know, putting my limiters out there at session 0. You know, the very first session, I say, here's what is allowed, here's what is not allowed. If you need it, it's on this printed reference material. Because I do that. Like, I will scour through books, and I will scour, especially if I'm running like 3.5 or Pathfinder or Starfinder, or, you know, any of the other variants therein. I will scour the books, all of it, every word of it. I will scour it all, and I will put into a list of, here's the races, here's the classes, here's all the starting equipment, here's what you get to start with. You know, pick from that, and I will put dozens, if not hundreds of options out there for players to do whatever they want, because I don't really care what they pick, as long as we all start in generally the same area. So that is one of the things I do at the very beginning, is like, and you're not going to run into anything that's not on that list to start with, especially at the very beginning. Now, later on, I might have things that weren't part of that list, but that'll be 5, 6, 7 months, or maybe even a year or two down the line. Like, just because, I said no gunslingers in Wrath of the Righteous from the very get-go doesn't mean it was impossible for a gunslinger to get that far north. It was perfectly possible. It was exceedingly unlikely. Yes, Connell, I see you. So would I have allowed a gunslinger at later levels? Maybe. The answer to that is absolutely maybe. Would I have run a gunslinger against them? Highly unlikely, because I had already said no. But if they had found some way, or if there was like a piece of equipment in those modules that said, "Oh yeah, this is a firearm," then I would say yes, absolutely, gunslingers are available, because gun is part of the treasure later on. Absolutely, I would allow it. But it's just one of those things that I set the expectation at session 0. That's it. That's how I build my trust. Here's what you can expect from me. This is what I expect out of you as players. And let's have a great game. So
the only way a gunslinger would actually, only way a gun would actually end up in that campaign is if we found it down in the hellscape. There's just really no other way. I'm sorry, but I'm looking at the mechanics of that game. It's like, yeah, I can see a devil taking or a demon taking a gun down to the abyss or wherever. Yeah, I can see it.
I mean, in some of the Hyperborea games I've done, we did find plot breaking or genre breaking weaponry in ruins as loot, and things that you're like, oh, that is a thing that can be done in this world. I didn't even think about that ahead of time. Like a flamethrower that can just straight up incinerate people.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much rounds us out for the discussion on Rule 0 this evening. If you've been watching and enjoying this episode, I encourage you to hit that like button. If you want to ask further questions about this topic or other topics, please consider leaving a comment in the comment section below. If you're not already subscribed to the channels here on the screen, please consider subscribing. Their links are also in the video's description below. That is going to round us out for the evening. I wish you all a very good night. Later.
Happy trails, folks.
Good night.
Don't get stuck doing something sticky.